Yeah, the elite college students who can't read books. This is from 2024. This development puzzled Dames till one day in the fall 2022 semester when a first-year student came to his office hours to share how challenging she found the early assignments. Literary humanity, that lit hum is literary humanities, right? Literature humanities requires students to read a book, sometimes a very long and dense one, in just a week or two. But the student told Dames that at her public high school, she had never been required to read an entire book. She had been assigned excerpts, poetry, and news articles, but not a single book cover to cover. My jaw dropped, Dames told me. The anecdote helped explain the change he was seeing in his students. It's not that they don't want to do the reading, it's that they don't know how. Middle and high schools have stopped asking them to. Telling you, man, it's them dang video games. Does it say which college that student goes to? Columbia University. I think there's a phenomenon we're not noticing that I'm also hesitant to ignore. 20 years ago, Dames' classes had no problem engaging in sophisticated discussions of Pride and Prejudice one week and Crime and Punishment the next. Now as students tell him up front the reading load feels impossible, it's not just the frenetic pace, they struggle to attend to small details while keeping track of the overall plot. No comprehensive data exists on this trend, but the majority of the 33 professors I spoke with relayed similar experiences. Well, then they're stupid? I mean, in a functional sense, yeah. It seems like it's more, they just don't know how to read. Like, at all. Because reading's a skill. It's not natural. ADHD is getting worse. Like I said, and people got mad at me for it, ADHD is a state that you can condition yourself into. If you have like a permanent 24/7 dopamine like machine, scroll feed, something you carry with you at all times, you are like teaching your brain to not be able to sit and engage with longer texts. They gotta just yoink people's phones in schools, man. Vaush, didn't you just say you weren't able to read, or did I misinterpret? Look, when I talk about like your attention span is being diminished by the constant dopamine drip feed, phone, so on and so forth, I'm absolutely referring to myself too. That's the difference between you people and me. I identify a broader trend. You all run away from it, like you know, like dogs running from a fire. You don't want to be caught in the light. I stand there. I know what I am. It affects pretty much everyone, to varying extents, of course. Hold on one second. I want to read a little more of this. I have a, pretty sure I have a subscription to The Atlantic. Or I was gifted one. What? Create an account. No. Sign in. Losing patience. For the reasons described. If I'm losing patience with this right now, what are my hopes in reading a goddamn book? Your glasses are crooked? Damn, that sucks. You said a minute ago it's video games, that's it? I'd rather play a video game than read a book. I mean, yeah, it's probably that to an extent. The anti-social contagion of ADHD people are mad in chat. I'm sorry, guys. There's just no way around it. Sorry, but you're full of shit. ADHD, read a book. Dude, we can't keep doing this, man. I'm sorry. Listen, I know you want to believe that all of your problems are caused by the unique construction of your brain and there's nothing you can do about them. Actually, you have a shocking amount of power to adjust the way you perceive reality, okay? ADHD is defined not as a chemical receptor in your brain or a specific proportion of neurons to whatever. It's not like a mathematical exercise. It's about meeting diagnostic criteria. And you can meet diagnostic criteria in changes in behavior, and behavior can be changed through the patterns that you set in your day-to-day life. Stop getting mad at me. I'm not attacking you. If anything, you're demonstrating to me exactly why we need to be more elitist about this, because you're illiterate. You took from what? What did I say? That the exposure to a phone, a constant dopamine hit, that's capable of affecting the way you behave, the way you would say, for example, respond to the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. And what did you take from that? What are you mad at me about? What did I do? Well, that's not correct. While ADHD is a criteria-based diagnosis, it's also associated with neurotransmitter, brain structure, and genetic differences. Yeah, everything in the brain is. Well, they don't know how the brain works. Everything in the brain is. All behaviors are influenced by genetics, brain structure, and neurotransmitters. You can do that with exercise. You know, your brain chemistry changes when you do stuff, right? I'm so sorry, but you're wrong. We use diagnostic criteria because they correlate with the condition, not because they are the condition. Damn, well then why don't they just measure the condition directly then, huh? So the only way they have to measure it is through the diagnostic criteria? We do when we can. Oh, yeah? How do they do it? Find me one human being on Earth who has had their ADHD diagnosed because there was a dipstick inserted into their brain. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we're doing spinal taps to determine psychiatric conditions now. Brain imaging. You can get brain imaging differences between people based on their patterns in life. Do you not you do realize that your brain changes? You're like, dog, there's no way your day-to-day behavior can affect the shape of your body. It's literally neuromuscular development. Well, you're telling me that by exercising, you can change what your body looks like? They literally look at what your body looks like under a microscope. Well, yeah, your behavior changes the way your body is shaped. Your behavior shapes your brain. You never heard of that before? You've never seen like a scientific article where saying something to the effect of like, well, based on like, if you watch more TV, that can have an effect in your brain structure. If you, live your life in this way, depending on what you eat, what kind of lifestyle, more or less vitamin D. You've never seen any of this? Vaush, we don't understand why ADHD happens. We assume there's a common physical cause. There isn't. It's defined by the diagnostic criteria. That's what it is. Are we going to do this every time? Why are you guys so locked in on this? This like delusional belief that you have that your like neurochemical behavior is preordained at birth and not affected by the behaviors that you engage in. You know that, like, for example, depression and anxiety can be reflected in a person's chemical brain state. Like, you can put a person's brain in the vat, you can take a look at it, and depression can be seen based on like brain pattern shit. But your day-to-day life can determine whether or not you have depression. Like if you go outside, you walk in the sun, you get some exercise, eating some pussy, whatever makes you happy, you can change your brain chemistry. To clarify, you're saying you don't believe ADHD, depression don't have physiological causes? No, when on earth did I say that? I said that your behavior can affect whether or not you have these things in many cases. Not 100%. Like sometimes people are just going to have anxiety like no matter what. But maybe you can like cognitive behavioral therapy your way out of it, And then you won't meet the diagnostic criteria for anxiety anymore. And then you'll be fine. Goalpost shifting? That's not goalpost shifting. Can somebody produce a clip of me saying there are no physiological causes to ADHD or any other thing on your any other psychiatric condition? They're shadowboxing again? Yeah, because people get really insecure about this. These are the same types of motherfuckers who get mad at you when you say people should be literate, because they're like, well, the reason I'm not literate is because of like, I don't know, trauma, which I was born with. Wait, therapy just manages conditions. It can't cure ADHD though. Do you think that therapy can take a person with clinical depression and make it so they no longer have clinical depression? Do you think that's possible? Just show of hands in chat. Do you think so? Yes or no? Do you think that's possible? Can a person go to therapy and on the first session, they're diagnosed with clinical depression, and at the last one, after 10 or 20, they can not have it? Yes? Okay, great. And we recognize that depression can have underlying genetic and physiological causes, but there are also lots of things in your day-to-day life you can do to affect it, right? It's possible there's like a wide range of potential causes. Why are you determined to die on this hill? You're actually dying trying to climb it, my friend. I'm right here in the I'm on the correct hill. I've been here my entire life. It's a little too steep for you to climb, it seems. I thought you took Adderall. I do take Adderall. Why does it matter what medications Vaush takes? Because see, the real reason people get upset at this is because they don't like acknowledging that they have control over their life. So they get frustrated at me because they assume my position, the one they're shadowboxing with, is that all of this is fake and not real and you can skillish your way out of it. That's what they think I'm saying. I haven't said that. Maybe it's a literacy issue. Literacy equals listening? Well, yeah, I mean, right? Like media literacy? It's like a broader kind of literacy. It's not all just reading, right? Here's a video of ADHD professionals describing genetic aspects of ADHD. Yes, there are genetic aspects to anxiety and depression as well. Could you not listen? Is it the ADHD why you can't listen? Yeah, of course. It's a brain chemistry thing. Of course it would be affected by chemistry. By genetics. Genetics construct your body and the brain in it. Do you think you can fully eradicate autism symptoms? I think that the language fully eradicate is pretty strong. We diagnose autism based on diagnostic criteria, right? It is possible for a person at one point in your life to meet enough criteria to be diagnosed as autistic, and then later in their life to not be diagnosed with those criteria and no longer be diagnosed as autistic. That's possible. It's happened to many people. Though people don't usually get double diagnosed, but it can certainly happen. You should include this topic in your My Positions and Everything videos. The people who get upset at it aren't going to go like engaging with the argument. They're upset because they're shadowboxing with the concept of culpability. It's not really about what I say. I was diagnosed with ADHD as a child. Turns out it was caused by trauma and maintained through habit. Coming to terms with my trauma and building better habits eliminated my ADHD. It's absolutely something you can gain and lose based on your environment. Oh, well, I mean, well done on improving your habits. Seems like a plausible denial argument for eugenics. Maybe with respect if you're stupid. If you, I don't, do you think it's eugenics for a guy to go to therapy so he's not depressed anymore? Because you're like, no, you're preferencing one brain state over another. You're suggesting people can change, which is an incentive for eliminationist attitudes towards depressive people. This is basically like the useless eaters dogma from Nazi Germany. You're being silly. I'm sorry. Come on. I think the reason people get defensive is because being told you can work through your issues sounds to them like, because your issues can be changed, they're not real/valid. Yeah, but that's their fault for thinking that is the issue, right? That's not my fault. And ultimately, it's the same thing that I was getting at with regards to the whole like literacy elitism thing, which is people are just really resistant to the concept of self-improvement, you know? And I think that we come at this from like a wide variety of angles. A lot of people are really emotionally fragile. Mental illness rates are through the roof, like relative to previous generations. And some of that is in a more diagnostic sensitivity, but a lot of it is also people are just probably more mentally ill. Like the increasing rates of depression and anxiety are clearly not just more diagnoses, right? Like there's an underlying truth to that. So people are really sensitive and people get really defensive when it's sort of like pressed to them that they should engage in self-improvement. But also there doesn't seem to be much like social value in engaging in self-improvement to begin with. And also the dang phones are making everyone have ADHD. And video games are more fun than books. I don't know, man. It seems like it's just... Vaush, just because you can adjust your lifestyle to accommodate for your neurotype does not mean you've changed your literal brain structure. I need you shouldn't be typing in chat. You should type into Google before you can type into chat. Can you change your brain structure through behavior? The answer is yes. You can. That is true. You can do that. That's literally what neuroplasticity is. You know that anytime you do anything, your brain is being rewired, right? Like your brain isn't a fixed entity. Everything in your body is recycling cells. Your bones change, your muscles change. They grow, they shrink. The fat gets burnt and re-added. When you remember something, the memories are literally electrical signals encoding in brain cells. It's not like it's changing. Like that is your brain chemistry. That is your brain structure, changing constantly throughout your life. Brain structure can be changed, but only to a point. Well, sure, but that's the case with anything. Your muscular structure can be changed, but only up to a point. Why not argue on sociology and not shit you never got a degree for? I don't understand what the point is of like being oppositional and then getting salty when you run out of arguments. Like what you know you're kind of like giving the game away there, right? I still struggle with this one after decades of having ADHD and taking meds for it. Do you take Adderall because you have an actual attention disorder or are you just lazy? I saw it on Twitter recently and I think it's actually a pretty good argument, but like the tweet was the difference between being lazy and ADHD is that when you're lazy, you postpone doing the things you don't want to do, but when you have ADHD, you postpone doing the things you do want to do as well because of executive dysfunction. That's not the whole meat and potatoes of it, but I think that's like that's like a nice little litmus test right there, I think. Like a little one, you know, it's not fully indicative. Also, depression can cause you to postpone things. Well, again, that's because none of these psychological criteria are distinct brain states. They're just terms that we use to describe general overlapping behavioral trends. There will never be a genetic cause of depression, anxiety, ADHD, whatever, that becomes the definition, because that just isn't what they are. Brains are incredibly complicated. You're just looking at some are though. Yeah, like Down syndrome, for example. Down syndrome, you have the extra chromosome. That's an example of a condition that is defined by a measurable physiological state. No, that's the example of a cause that we found. No, there's a difference between finding something that correlates to something and defining something through that trait. This is a taxonomical flaw, and you need to read Foucault, is what I'm saying, basically. All of the reason we use diagnostic criteria is because we're describing trends and states of behavior. It wouldn't make... Can you imagine if one day they were like, hold on, new definition for depression just dropped. It turns out it's caused by a specific gene in your head or whatever. So if you don't have that gene, you no longer have depression clinically. We're no longer acknowledging your depression. You feel depressive? Sorry, you don't have it. What would be the point of that? We already have a perfectly working definition of depression. You might find genetic markers, but if a person doesn't have that marker but still has the symptoms of depression, would you not still want them to be treated with depression? Diagnoses are tools, not the goal. There's no goal. What do you mean goal? Things are defined as they are. What do you mean? The definition of these diagnoses are the diagnostic criteria. There's no underlying empirical. Why do you want the brain state to be reduced to this positivist, like actually everything, every set of behaviors that we've come to identify through diagnostic criteria is actually caused by an underlying empirical marker that we can find. It's like the people obsessed with finding the gay gene. Why? What are you looking for? Oh yeah, you were agreeing with me, that's right. Oh, no. Listen, okay? Yeah, right now our definition of being gay is like, you know, sucking cocks and like wearing fishnet and assless chaps and stuff like that. But in reality, like, that's only the beginning. In reality, being gay is caused by a mutation in one of your, you know, in your brain, right? And as soon as we find the gay gene, then we'll know. And once we find that out, everyone who's out there sucking cock and popping ass on the street, but doesn't have that gene, they're no longer gay. And people who have been in a stable, loving, mutually sexually interested heterosexual marriage for 40 years, well, if they have the gene, well, they better buckle up because their ass is getting thrown over into the gay camp. How can you call me eugenicist when you guys are the ones that want to come up with like genetic markers for behavior? You're the one that, dude, the eugenicists are the ones obsessed with finding the gene that causes the thing. I'm the one saying it's a complicated mesh of genetic, physiological, and environmental causes. They found genetic markers for ADHD? Yeah, but it's not the definition of ADHD. It's just like, there are genetic markers for depression as well. In the sense that if you have them, it's more likely you have that. But you can have those markers and not have ADHD, and vice versa. Vaush is arguing it's nurture, Chat's arguing it's nature, meanwhile it's both. Moron centrist. I'm saying it's both. Chat's the one arguing it's not nurture. Please, my editors are starving. Yeah. Imagine if you were denied ADHD medication because you didn't have a specific genetic marker. That would be dystopian, and that's what Chat is unknowingly arguing for. Yeah. They're kind of opening up the door to the eugenicists too, because my argument is that you could never actually eradicate anything like autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, because even if there are like concurrent genetic markers, those behaviors will manifest in anyone, or any population at least, given enough time. But Chat's like, well, no, actually, once we figure out the gene, we can identify who the problematic people are. Basically, what I'm saying is everyone who disagreed with me is a Nazi. I've made that argument before, and frankly, it's been a good one. It served me well in my career. Well, ADHD is a developmental chronic disorder, which depression isn't. It's like saying HIV is curable because influenza is curable because they're both viruses. Depression and ADHD are both defined by the diagnostic criteria. The reason HIV isn't curable but influenza is because we haven't found the big kill HIV button yet. Maybe one day we will. I don't know. Honestly, we kind of are getting towards curing HIV. But if ADHD and depression are both determined through diagnostic criteria and behaviorally modifiable, which they are, you can have them at some points in life and not have them at other points in life. Like, that's just how it is. Flint and steel. How about that? Was that good? Losing faith in you, TBH? I don't care. I'm sorry. It's your fault. I don't know why people are... This is why we are where we are with all this shit, man. Because I guarantee you that if there was a big push for literacy, a bunch of people would be like, this is ableist and, you know, prescriptivist, actually. This is fascism. Would you say there were autistic people in early civilizations like 10,000 years ago? Absolutely. Probably less than now, though. Fewer than now. Sorry, I was almost illiterate. Not everyone can afford to go to the library. Please Google the diametric model of mental illness. Since I'm right and you're the one who's wrong, shouldn't you be the one Googling for more information? Holy shit, it's windy outside. Just please consider that you might be wrong later when you're alone with your thoughts. Why are you talking like that? That's so weird. What the hell? You sound like a missionary trying to. Come on. Alone with my. Do you think that after streams I'm like reflected, like I'm like, man, the neuroplastic model of diagnostic criteria with regard to mental conditions, I don't know. I feel like I overstepped on that one. Come on, maybe you reflect. Why is everyone so... Yeah, you're trying to make me feel bad. I have my name and face attached to all this, okay? When I argue with you people, you get to dip in and out of the void of anonymity to take shots at me. I'm sitting up here on the hill. Is dyslexia similar to ADHD? I actually don't know what causes dyslexia. That's true. To the people in chat who disagree with me, can we control F in their search history, or in their chat history, what their opinions are on DoorDash? There's got to be an overlap. You probably can cure dyslexia in some cases though, right? My guess would be that it's also a diagnostic criteria thing, and that there might be some kind of like cognitive process for improving it to the point where you no longer make the like mix-up mistakes. I'm not really sure though. Well, it's an attention thing. I don't really know what causes it. Depends what you mean by cure. As in, you would no longer be diagnosed with it if you went to a doc. It can't be cured. Just keep in mind that the pop answers you get on questions like this are often in, like, the people who write these articles also need to read Foucault, basically, is what I'm saying. But let me look. You're talking about reading Foucault, then saying that people were autistic in medieval times, dumbass? Yeah, they weren't diagnosed autistic back then, dumbass. They would meet the diagnostic criteria today, dumbass. What the f are you talking about? You think I'm arguing they were diagnosed with it back then? You think Foucault wouldn't have argued that people back then could have been diagnosed today under those criteria? So wait, what causes it? Understanding. Well, what causes it? Diagnostic criteria dyslexia. DSM-5 criteria, persistent difficulties in reading despite appropriate instruction, word reading accuracy, reading fluency, reading comprehension. Yeah, you could probably not have dyslexia, right? I mean, if you improved on these outcomes, you would just simply not get diagnosed anymore, which is what it means to have dyslexia. Not saying it's going to happen every time, but how? That's the question. I don't know. Yeah, practice, I imagine. You can overcome the symptoms, but you can't cure them. Yeah, but for something that's defined by diagnostic criteria, overcoming the symptoms is curing it. It's a condition. It's not like a permanent brain state. Could slip back into it. Not really, though. It's akin to masking. Okay, you know how a person can be paraplegic and then they can no longer be paraplegic if they start walking on their two legs again? But then if something happens to their legs a third time, they can be paraplegic again? You're just using strategies to compensate for the symptoms? Yeah, but all we measure are the symptoms because it's based on the diagnostic criteria. You can get fonts that help them distinguish letters, make letters bigger, get reading glasses. Yeah, I've heard about stuff like that. If I recall correctly, curing is usually defined as something where you don't require continued treatment to prevent symptoms. That's true. Curing might not work because curing implies that there's like an on and off switch for the presence of the condition anyway. Like, you wouldn't really say you're curing somebody's paraplegia if they couldn't walk before, but now they can. You would just say they no longer have it, because curing implies that it's like a definite condition that has been removed, which isn't really like, you could, there might have been a disease causing the paraplegia, which could be cured, and then you're no longer paraplegic, but the paraplegia itself wouldn't be cured, you just wouldn't have it anymore. I guess, yeah, that's an important distinction, I suppose, to avoid confusion. Does that apply to ADHD then? Well, yeah, that's what I've said. You cannot have ADHD after having been diagnosed with it if the diagnostic criteria no longer identify you as having it. Vaush sounding like a conservative parent who tells you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, thank you for reaffirming my argument that the people who disagree with me are doing so because they're upset, because they're shadow boxing against their parents and not because they're listening to what I say. Vaush just admitted ADHD can be cured. Well, no, not cured. You could not have it anymore based on the diagnostic criteria. Would the cure remove verbiage work with something like depression, though? People say that they've been cured of their depression, but that's not really the correct language, right? Like, I think we say that because it feels comforting, but I don't think that that's really like the right language. Overcome depression, yeah, something like that. You could say overcome ADHD, but I don't think that ADHD has the same like negative associations that depression does. You don't really need to do that. You're talking about remission? Yeah, but you could say everything is in remission if you want to use that. Yes, I'm familiar with the term remission, thank you. That's the textbook definition of cured, you absolute imbecile. I don't think so at all. Again, people don't colloquially refer to like the ability to be like ambulatory again, a curing of paraplegia. There's a lot of like overlap. You're meaning treated, not cure. When did we get on this semantics argument? Does this have anything to do with what I was talking about? Why the are we talking about the difference? This doesn't grasp, this doesn't get at the underlying meaning at all. Anyway, this shit just reminds me of the people who like they think that like advocacy for gay people is like, well, they can't help it because of the gay gene, or like with trans people as well. You know, you can't really get at trans advocacy. You can't get at its core unless you're willing to deconstruct like gender as a or sex, I guess, as a broader construct, right? A lot of people just want to do it in like the blue brain, pink brain, blue body kind of thing. They don't get at the underlying, you know. A lot of people don't think that your sexuality or your gender are in any way influenced by environment, which I think is, well, a kind of illiteracy of itself, right? Like how can you believe transgender people exist, but then think that these features of a person's identity are concrete and immutable, right? It doesn't make any sense. It's dumb essentialization. Yeah, which is what people are trying to do to neurological conditions. Just because it's not a choice doesn't mean it's innate. That's true. I know you all really wanted that one. There are some aspects of the human condition that are immutable, like some people can't see the color red. They are still human. Yeah. But the ability to see the color red, I mean, that's literally up to the cones in your eyeballs. I mean, that's a pretty empirical marker right there. Not really an empirical marker for something like gender or sexuality, right? Yes, the human brain is an organ. Last I checked, it's made of matter and cells, just like the human eye. Am I cognizant? Come on. You think that gender and sexuality and your neurological state are as empirically determinable as the presence or not presence of red receptive cones in your eyeballs? Like that, like you're talking about not just a physiological condition there. You're talking about like the literal, like whether or not they're susceptible to or receptive to that wavelength of light. We don't have anything even remotely approximating that level of empiricism when we're looking at human behavior as it relates to things like gender or sexuality or whatever. Is gender dysphoria empirically presentable? That's also a diagnostic criteria thing. I just don't understand the desire to essentialize everything. It doesn't make it any more legitimate. You know what the Nazis do when they find an essentialized, empirical, verifiable gene in your brain that makes you trans? They find the people with it and they put them in the camp. Trust me, it's not liberating. It is, it's not, you're not, it's all a very plastic system. It doesn't mean that it's illegitimate. Am I cognizant? I genuinely just don't think you've thought about it that much. Over-medicalization of everything actually prevents people from getting the care they need. It doesn't help them get it. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. If you believe ADHD is environmental, then conservatives can ban ADHD medication. How does that follow? They can ban it if they want. What does that have to do with it being environmentally determinable? What's the relationship there? He's saying they have a better argument. How? Also, yeah, conservatives are already essentialists. They're like you. They already think that everything is just caused by the way that you are. They don't believe in like the social model of psychology. You think conservatives have read Foucault? People think if it's socially determined, then it's fake. You think that. I don't think that. But also, you're doing the gay gene argument. Like, well, no one will respect homosexuals if they think that you can be gay because of a social influence. You know, you have to don't fall for the bait and start buying into the essentialist argument from the other perspective, where you're like, well, okay, I agree with you that the only way a thing can be valid is it for it to be genetically determinable, and now we're going to argue on that. I don't think I'm gay because of social influence. I don't know who you are. I can't say that either way. I don't even know if you're gay. You could be faking. You haven't shown me your 23andMe. How am I supposed to know if you're gay? I guess I can't speak for others, but it does feel weird to think that some people's homosexuality is socially determined. Everything is socially determined. What do you mean? It's all like social expression. There's no way to know. It's all nature nurture bullshit. But also, like, at the same time, like, we're all susceptible to those influences. I don't think being attracted to men as a man is. Didn't earlier you say you don't think things become less legitimate if they're environmentally influenced, but now here you are arguing that you think it's weird to imagine that gay people might be gay because of social influence? Was I not correct in prescribing to you your belief that social influence delegitimizes a state of being? I said people will think that. Yeah, I'm saying you think that. I do not believe that. I think you do. I'm curious, could this reinforce the right's narrative about not letting gay people adopt or having gay children socializing with their precious straight people? Yeah, it could, but like that will always be their argument. They will always, like, the argument from conservatives essentially is that if you are gay or trans, it's because you were molested as a child. But they're believing that is like a superposition. They'll make that argument if it benefits them. If not, they'll say it was something else. At the end of the day, they just hate you, which is why I think that like you have to refute the argument not by engaging with it at its level. Well, let's analyze like how many gay people were molested as children. Like what the fuck, like, you know, like getting at it through that, you know, like you're trying to figure out math on it or something, and then account for all the control variables. I think you have to just put your feet down and say like, you know, I reject the dynamic altogether. It's all just like a hazy, socially reinforced blur. I'm reminded there was I think a trans girl who killed herself after making a social media post on Twitter sometime over the weekend. I didn't look too much into it, but there was a Nazi who quote tweeted her, or her last post, I mean. And the Nazi was, you know, just gloating that the trans girl was dead. And obviously this incited a lot of backlash on account of that being inhuman behavior. And it turns out the Nazi who was gloating over the dead trans girl was themselves a fat, brown-skinned, stupid little teen with suicidal ideation themselves. Like there was some old post and they were like, but not trans, doing the same. Right, exactly. But like it's the thing where like if you're suicidal as a trans person, it's because, you know, being trans is a contagion and unnatural and mentally ill, blah 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 blah. But if a Nazi is mentally ill, it's because of the Jews, right? Past a point, you can't fall for the bait on their when they project their misery onto the world. You can't engage with them at that level, you know. If I recall, they said, I don't think life will be worth living beyond my teen years. The Nazi said that, not the trans girl. Yeah. I'm on the fence here, but let me steelman the counter argument. If a lot of these things are more nurture than nature and changes in behavior and socialization, it legitimizes conversion therapy to normalize people out of things perceived as deviant. A few problems. Oh, wait, hold on. Since conversion therapy doesn't work, we have to assume it's more innate than socialized. For one, it's not like a solid line 50-50, 70-30, whatever. For two, conversion therapy doesn't not work because it's mostly innate. It doesn't work because it doesn't work. You can't force a person out of socialized behavior. For example, and I've posed this example before, what sports team you're a fan of, totally socially determined. Anyone going to argue if you're into the Kings, the Dodgers, the, you know, whatever, that's genetic? No, it's like, well, whatever your team is in your city if you're into sports, right? But what kind of conversion therapy would you need to be subjected to make you no longer like that sports team and like a different one? Can't do it, right? They could kill you, torturing you. But what in your brain would they have to change? What in this infinitely complex web of neurons would they have to change to make you stop liking one and start liking another? Even for something that's completely socially determined, like which sports team you're keen on, you couldn't do it, could you? Basically, if we controlled all humans' thoughts 100%, we could. Yeah, well, yeah, if you controlled all humans' thoughts, you could do anything with what a person thinks. But that's my point, right? And then you have to argue, like, well, what's the point of the conversion therapy anyway? To which the obvious answer is like, well, there's actually nothing wrong with people being gay. Has anyone consensually convinced to stop being same-sex attracted, though? In the whole of human history, I don't know. People are complicated. I don't think that conversion therapy can authentically change your sexuality, though. Doesn't Wikipedia literally say it's mostly hormonal? Hormones are released in response to brain states. Brain states are plastic. They shift in accordance with social influence. For example, your body can flood you with hormones because you're into like a kink or something, like latex, but latex is a recent invention, you know? Like, you weren't born with the gene that makes you into latex. Your Paleolithic brain did not lock that in up here. There's social influence, but hormones respond to that. You sure? Yeah. I understand, but I mean, it's believed to be womb hormones and stuff that happens before you're born. Sure, with a lot of stuff, and that would be nature. But nature can also be altered through nurture. So it's not like it's a clean template that's left unaltered in your life. The reason we do this full rant every time is because it's really important as a bedrock for understanding a bunch of other stuff with regards to like socialization, essentialization. I think that like this is it's very, very important to understand just how deep this goes, in my opinion. Yeah, but can a human make himself not same-sex attracted even with conscious effort? Make themselves? I don't know, maybe. Not be? Yes. There are many, many, many cases of people who at some point in their life had a different sexuality to other points in their life. But how does that make? I don't know what you mean by make. What do you mean by make? Can you give an example of that? Can you not think of any, even in your own life, with people you know, people who at some point were bisexual, but then later in life they weren't, or people who were heterosexual, but later became bisexual, or you did like, because I can think of like even people I know who have had that happen. So presumably it's not that uncommon. People usually describe that experience as discovering their true self, not as a change. I think that's cope. I think that's because we essentialize sexuality. Like I think that's because we make people think that these things are like locked in, concrete, unchanging factors of their mental state, so that when something about it changes, they're like, oh, I'm discovering the new me. When in reality, like, yeah, your interests can change. Yeah, God, haven't you seen trans people talk after they get on HRT? And they're all like, oh my God, it turns out my sexuality is different than I thought it was. It's not discovering your true self. Your brain chemicals are changing. Doesn't that just enable the sexuality as a choice argument? Not that it's a choice, that it's socially influenced. Just, there are tons of things that are socially influenced. That doesn't mean they're a choice, like a conscious choice. A choice is behavioral, right? You choose whether to go on a walk or stay indoors. You choose whether to DoorDash or make something out of beans and rice, okay? What kind of person you become may end up being an aggregate, like a combination of your individual choices, but that doesn't mean that you chose to be those people. You know, what part of hormones changing who you're attracted to is a choice? I mean, I think you can make choices that have an influence over stuff like this, for sure. 100%. I think, for example, straight guys might make a series of choices to potentially end up being bisexual if they are willing to be more open and exploratory with, I don't know, going out to the club or hanging out with the right people. You know, they might not choose to become bi, but they might choose in 1,000 little ways to expose themselves to experiences that make them at first receptive and then interested in being bisexual. And once you're interested in being bisexual and then you act on it and you're into it, that's kind of being bisexual. Yeah, it's malleable, not controllable. Yeah, I think that's a good way of, yeah, it's just the rigidity of the concept bothers me a little bit. Vaush, us old heads have been arguing with homophobes our whole lives that the gay pride parade can't turn any kids gay. You're telling me the homophobes were right all along? Well, forcing gay people to not have a pride parade forces young people to stay or be straight. So it kind of goes both ways. Like I believe in the social contagion of homosexuality and transgenderism theory, but I also believe it for cisgenderism and heterosexuality. Like if you use the resources of the state to suppress the visibility of gay people, you are forcing people's sexualities to go down a certain path and in the other direction. But there is no society in history, at least not to my knowledge, certainly not today, where straight people are silenced. And essentially every society today, to some extent or another, does so with queer people. So I would say that while the social contagion theory is very much the case in all directions, it's very obvious which side of the equation is doing the artificial suppression. And it is not the queer people, you know? It is, in fact, the straights and the cisgenders who are grooming. Curious about your take on asexuality? Hey, listen, me too, okay? I'll get back to you on my opinions on asexuality the next time I hear a divergent definition of it on social media. But if they're right, can't they then say that heterosexuality is better for producing children? You're already buying into the idea that at this point, that the state should be able to torture and suppress people in order to produce more children. I mean, at that point, you might as well say like, well, then logically, shouldn't the state be able to like kidnap women and set them up for breeding farms and have them like raped over and over? Because like, doesn't that then when you say that women can produce children even if they don't consent to the sex that produces the kid, aren't you conceding to the conservatives that breeding farms are a viable way of addressing the the birth rate crisis? No. No. Listen, the problem with conversion therapy fundamentally is that you're torturing people for no reason, okay? Like you can't like, well, okay, well, what if like don't straight people have more babies? First of all, maybe. But second of all, like for one, they're not anymore, basically. For two, half of all gay people are trans now because of wokeness. So who knows who's having kids? The issue clearly isn't too many gay people. The issue is no one wants to have kids because of video games and phones. And also, it just doesn't follow that like you should like engage in this maximalist like torture, like conversion therapy doesn't even work. You know. Look, the birth rates are going down in Saudi Arabia and Iran too, okay? It's not the prominence of gay people making the difference. Yeah, he's also said conversion therapy could work for autistic people. When have I said that? We've been down this road so many times, but all I have to say is that if you think I'm conceited, you make it worse when the only way you can criticize me is by shadowboxing with fake positions and strawmanning me. Like you could like that just makes me feel like I'm right. Just wild to say that. I have never, ever advocated for conversion therapy or suggested that it works. You have literally said that? No, I'm Wax Newman. I'm sorry. I haven't. I have not said that. We're being pulled back in. Also, even if I suggested that you could make a person not autistic through conversion therapy, that wouldn't be an advocacy for conversion therapy because that's torture. Like, you could say, oh, well, through this, like, prolonged torture method, you can make a left-handed person right-handed, which you can. You can force left-handed people to become right-handed by, like, forcing them. You don't necessarily torture, you just kind of, like, force them to learn with their right hand, I guess, but it's whatever. But, like, that's not an advocacy for the process. I think people have issue with your take that autism can go away as you get older. Autism is defined in people as meeting the diagnostic criteria for autism. You're describing like sets of behaviors that you test for through diagnostic criteria. As you get older, you change, your mind changes, your behaviors change. It's possible that over time, you might have previously been diagnosed with autism, but then if you retake those the same test with the same criteria, you might no longer meet the criteria sufficient to be diagnosed with it. It's not like being cured or uncured. It's just a general descriptor of your behavioral trends. People can change over time. That doesn't mean they always do, and not always enough to shift one in or out of a diagnosis. But that can happen. That doesn't mean that autism isn't real or like fake or whatever. Isn't that called masking? No. Masking is when you deliberately expend effort to hide or alter behaviors, but your personality can just naturally change. Like you can mask in the sense that you can make an effort to hide or exacerbate certain behaviors to fight against it, but also your personality can change. Masks aren't always conscious. Yet people change. People can change. So it's just living and dealing with autism. Oh my God. What is it? What is it about this topic? No, no. Sometimes over the course of your life, you can change, and sometimes you'll meet the criteria and sometimes you won't. Maybe you'll meet it your whole life. Maybe you won't meet it your whole life. Your personality and your brain state and your cognitive biases are all fluid and shift in your life day to day. So autism can no longer meet diagnostic criteria. Does that mean you still have autism or not? If you don't meet the diagnostic criteria, you no longer have autism. Because that's what we define having autism as, meeting the diagnostic criteria. People have irrational fears of shit like speaking on stage, but you can work on it and get to a point where you can speak on stage. Sure, deep down the stage fright might still be there, but to an outside observer, you would be seen as not having stage fright. Sure, but you could also get over stage fright. Both of those things are possible. You can suppress stage fright and go up there and do a performance anyway and not look like you have it. Or you can just genuinely overcome it and not have stage fright anymore. Both are possible. So you can get over autism. Your mind can change over the course of your life to the point where you no longer have it. And then maybe you can have it again. And maybe in the future you'll have it again. Who knows? You can dip in and out of that shit. You can weave between lanes. So you cannot have autism as a kid, then get it when you're like 40. You can be diagnosed with it when you're like 40. You can't really get it as in it's like a disease or whatever. You don't really like get depression, right? Depressive symptoms are present in basically everyone to some extent, but you're not always going to be diagnosed with depression. So having autism purely depends on being diagnosed. That is how we define having autism. Yeah. It's a general term we use to describe a collection of traits, behaviors, mannerisms, personality, attributes, so on and so forth. Yeah, it is literally called the autism spectrum. How about undiagnosed autism? Yeah, that can also be a thing. Vaush, there's a difference between something being observable externally and internally. Am I cognizant? I can't keep doing this with you, okay? My position on this is objectively correct. I'm sorry. I can't keep finding ways to rephrase this. There isn't like a nodule in your brain that is the autism on-off switch, and some people have it. It's literally called a spectrum. Like basically everything about brain states, it's a nature-nurture thing. Same with gender and sexuality and depression and anxiety and a bunch of other crap. We can't keep doing this. I no longer meet the criteria to be diagnosed with ADHD, but I still deal with issues of attention and focus. I got bad news for you, buddy. So does everyone else. This is the shit that pisses me off. Do autistic people think that allistic people don't sometimes struggle to maintain eye contact? Do ADHD people think that non-ADHD people don't also have issues like holding attention? Dude, we all have the same basic construction up here. You're describing general trends in behavior. It's you don't have switches in your brain. Oh no, you don't get it. As a non-ADHD person, you have no idea what inattentiveness might look like. Everyone suffers from executive dysfunction, just to varying extents. It's not only ADHD people. It's just ADHD people have more of it to the point where they're diagnosed with it. We're all the same shit. This is the thing. People, you lock yourself in a box. You don't understand, and you lose the ability to relate to other people because you needlessly confine the expanse of these very human experiences to medical categorizations. You're looking at doctors and diagnostic criteria to give you validity with these traits. It's just not how it works. There are people who do not have clinical depression who have depressive symptoms. There are people who do not have autism who share a lot in common with autistic people. Cisgender people experience dysphoria in addition to dysmorphia. Straight people have had gay thoughts. It's been known to happen. There are lesbians who have slept with men. We're all pretty similar. It's like a subcategorization of or this genre or where people are like, did you know that like non-autistic people literally don't have an internal world? Develop a personality. Your personality is not what you were diagnosed with. It's uninteresting. People do this with everything. They do this with trauma as well. Like, just stop with the categories. Who was the guy you said to read about? Foucault. But I'm mostly telling people to read him so I can dismiss their arguments. You should read him, though. I mean, he's very smart. That's what drove me crazy about my classmates in my gender and sexuality class. Everyone kept categorizing themselves into smaller and smaller groups. Yeah, that's like genuinely. That's why I just like queer. And my definition of queer is so broad that I include plenty of straight people in it. Straight cis people, because they're like fruity with it, you know. I think it's more of a cultural marker than like what you do. I listen, I want to gatekeep on literacy. I don't want to gatekeep with these broader descriptors. If you want to gatekeep on something aspirational, that makes sense to me. It's better to be literate than illiterate, objectively, at least intersubjectively, okay? But when it comes to being any of these other things, I don't know. Just do the best you can. People get so locked in on the differentiation. And it's why I keep talking about this. It's why I take the bait every single time, because I really do think this is like a root issue. Like you can lock your feet in at this point, and from it you can like a beautiful like normative framework can blossom out, you know? It's so fundamental that a lot of people don't even want to think about it, because if you can talk to a lot of people and they don't even understand like the root of it, right? It's like talking to a boomer about well, you shouldn't say that gay people were born that way because it implies that the only reason you shouldn't discriminate against them is because they can't help being different. And then they're like, well, I don't understand. I thought that was how we advocate for gay people. And it's like, look, boomer, I get it. And you grew up in a different time than me. I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying, like, the dialectic is advanced, or the blue brain, pink body, pink brain, blue body shit with trans people, or the idea, well, like, the validity of trans people is also because they're born that way. I don't think trans people are born that way. I don't think anyone's born anyway when it comes to these constructs. For some things like Down syndrome, which is defined as the extra chromosome, or if you're born without a leg, you just don't have a leg, right? But so much stuff that we take for granted as like a socially indeterminable biological mandate is in reality like really up for grabs, right? What's with all these kids being diagnosed with autism now? Do you think it's overdiagnosis? No, I just think people are more autistic. I think it's because of the dang phones. So do you just take the L on autism that's directly connected? Wax Snoot, what is wrong with your brain, man? Maybe this is the reason why you're illiterate, because you're consuming the kind of social media feed slop that compels you to open a question with, so do you just take the L on? Let me finish. So do you just take the L on autism that's directly connected to a genetic condition? Are you seriously still on this? How can there be nurture when there's nature? Are you being for real? Come on. This has already been asked and answered 1,000 times. Bro, you seriously think that there's a nature and nurture element to autism? Okay, get this, dipshit. Look at that. There's a nature element. Jesus, I don't understand. I didn't say autism isn't influenced by nurture. Then what the f are you saying? People just like to argue. I understand it. So gender and sexuality are also nature and nurture? Well, gender is. Sexuality is definitionally constructed socially, but obviously your socialization isn't going to affect your genotype. But what we consider with regards to what defines sex is socially determined. That's like one level down, right? Where gender is socially constructed at the top level because it's and our engagement with it are entirely ephemeral, entirely socially constructed. Whereas sex, we socially determine the genetic markers that we use to define what sex is. It's like you're saying it's mostly nurture, which is equally as redacted. I don't understand the need to shadowbox. I'm saying it's nature and nurture. That's the position I've had this entire time. I don't understand why, like, you're constructing in your head like an 80-20, 75-25, 70-30 split. This is why conservatives call LGBT a mind virus. Yeah, it is. But you could fairly argue that heterosexuality or heteronormativity are also mind viruses. But in truth, the state has and society at large have dedicated considerable resources to the suppression of queer people, whereas no suppression of straight and cis people has taken place. So if you want to argue from like nature, I would say the equilibrium, we got to swing way the back, Like if you're making the argument it goes both ways, then sure. But like, listen, okay, there are no like what would it be, like compulsory homosexual societies suppressing all straight people. I agree, that's true, nuts. Dude, people online are so ready to categorize, and then you meet any queer person in real life and all of them are like, yeah, I don't know, it's complicated. Because it turns out all of these like weird obsessions with taxonomy don't survive contact with the complexity of a person, who actually is living life, having real experiences. Nuanced question without engaging with epissery, Vaush. Do you think there's value in having some form of description for the people who fall in and out of a diagnosis over time and have a high predisposition for falling back? Oh yeah, sure. Dude, in a colloquial sense, if a person like on and off was positive for like depression, and they said like, well, I'm depressive, or like, yeah, I tend to have depression or something. Or if they were like on and off with ADHD diagnosis, where sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off, whatever, like they kept testing over and over and it kept fluctuating. And they were like, yeah, I have ADHD. I keep like, bumping up and up against the spectrum. Yeah, whatever. In a colloquial sense, I have no issue with that. I just want people to understand that there's nothing that these diagnoses are pointing to that's like inherent to the brain. What they're describing is a set of traits, and the traits can vary in prominence over time, right? Like there might be some points in your life when you're a little bit more like socially sheltered, a little more isolated, a little more socially awkward, and maybe during those times you meet enough criteria for autism, but then during the times when you're a little more socially outgoing, you're a little bit more experienced talking to people, you wouldn't flag those same criteria. You would fall just short, In a colloquial sense, you can self-define whatever you like. I just want people to understand you're not pointing at like an underlying autism switch that's on. And whenever you test whenever the diagnostics come back and it says that you don't have autism, it's because the switch has eluded detection, but it's still on in there or whatever. Because, I don't think that's dumb. The root of the problem is basically similar to the God of the Gaps argument. Vaush doesn't understand that diagnostic criteria doesn't define the disease. There's no disease, man. There's no underlying condition. You don't understand the argument. There's no underlying truth that's being described. The criteria refers to the traits. The exhibition of the traits is the traits that define autism aren't symptoms of autism. They are the autism. There's no underlying autism factory in the brain that's churning out autism cells that you're only getting like the symptoms of. We don't know. Oh my God. Yes, there is. It's called DNA. Why? What makes you guys so confident on something you're wrong about? I don't understand. I can't believe people in chat are actually advocating for the position that autism is a disease. They don't understand. They're unironically doing the like RFK Jr. fascist obsession with essentialist mental taxonomy. Like they don't get it. I don't understand. Like, we literally had a segment last week laughing about how RFK said he was going to find the cure for autism, and here we are acting like he had something right. Yeah, literally, the people in chat who are arguing with me are essentially taking the position that there's an underlying biological marker that is the definition of autism, and that if we could cure it, if it was curable, it should be done. That's the implicit suggestion, because you're doing the same thing that the boomers do with they can't help being gay. They were born that way. You're doing the same thing. You're seeding the argument. You're seeding the rich, complex tapestry of human mental and social development to, well, actually, there's just a gene in your brain that makes you that way. RFK thinking it can be cured makes his position closer to yours, man. You're the one who thinks you can stop being autistic because of social influence. How do you not follow me on this, but you follow me on the other things I talk about? Like, how is this the thing you get hung up on? Dog, you literally said earlier that you acknowledge that autism is affected by nurture. Like, what are you arguing about? I didn't say autism isn't influenced by nurture. What are you arguing about? It's formed early in life by nature and nurture. It doesn't mean you can stop being autistic later in life. So nurture can affect the development of autism in young people, but there's no way for it to affect it past a certain arbitrary age. That makes no sense. It's not arbitrary. It's how brain development works. There's also an age cutoff for learning language, for example. It's not a cutoff. You can still learn new languages when you're older. Your brain keeps developing for as long as you're alive. Do you think your brain stops changing once you turn 8 or something? Your brain is more plastic when you're younger, but that doesn't mean it doesn't change when you're older. At the end of the day, we do not have any diagnostic criteria for autism outside of like asking questions and evaluating behavior. Nor will we ever. Persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts is manifested by the following currently or by history. Examples are illustrative, not exhaustive, see text. Types of behavior. I'm not seeing any genetic markers in here. I'm not seeing look for this brain. Don't they also include sensory stuff with autism? But you have to ask people questions to get their feelings on that. Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, this isn't very helpful because they're exclusively looking at stuff like vitamin deficiencies or what the age of the parents are when the kid is born. It doesn't really talk about anything else. Do people even study for that stuff? Look at this. Do you expect we'll see a spike in autism cases as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? Yes, sadly, I think that's possible. And not just because many pregnant women have been getting COVID-19, but also because many people, pregnant women included, have been dealing with serious mental stress during the pandemic. It'll be a few years before we know if the autism rates rise in response, because the condition is usually diagnosed around age 3 or later. It's also quite likely that rates may rise more generally for a range of neurodevelopmental conditions, including ADHD. Part of the explanation is certainly that doctors are more aware of the condition or are diagnosing more frequently, but my colleagues and I suspect that other factors, like making people having children later in life or environmental changes that are making our bodies more vulnerable to infections and immunological problems, are contributing to the uptick in cases. They're not looking at social factors at all. Environmental changes like increased susceptibility to infections and immunological problems. See, stuff like this comes across to me as quite reactionary because it's doing the like autism speak shit of like, Yeah, autism is a disease that's caused when you have a kid too late in life or like with the wrong vitamins. It's a deficiency caused by the lack of vitamins. That's anyway, the point that I was getting at, does this not come across as a little bit eugenic to you? You've spoken publicly about your own experiences raising a son with autism. Is there anything that you wish you'd known back when you were pregnant? You know, it's interesting because I just discovered through my own participation as a subject in an unrelated medical study that I have a genetic mutation that's known to interfere in the body's absorption of folic acid. So this tells me it was possible I wasn't getting enough folic acid when I was pregnant back in the late 1980s, even though I was taking the recommended 400 micrograms per day. Now, did a lack of folic acid cause my son's autism? That's way too simplistic because there were probably lots of genetic and environmental factors involved. Did it contribute? Maybe. I certainly wish I'd known I was susceptible to folate deficiency when I was pregnant. They really do talk about autism like it's a birth defect caused by like a weak sperm and womb. I think language like this is very dangerous, not because I think there's anything wrong with examining the nature side, but to completely disregard the nurture side. I don't know, it just comes across like it's just treating a damn disease. This is how the right talks about it, and it's also how some of you in chat have been talking about it. Biology seems to be the biggest impact for sexuality. Substance soda, we can't keep doing this. I can't keep saying nature and nurture, and you're and people in chat are like, well, if it's nature and nurture, how can there be nature? We can't keep doing this. We can't keep doing it over and over and over again. You just linked me the Wikipedia article, Biology and Sexual Orientation, of which the second sentence is, while scientists do not know the exact cause of sexual orientation, they theorize it is caused by a complex interplay of genetic, hormonal, and environmental influences. Why do you... What? However, evidence is weak for hypotheses that the postnatal social environment impacts sexual orientation, especially for males. Especially for males. That's interesting. That's fascinating. I wonder why social influence might be perceived as having more of an effect on female sexual orientation than males. And there's one cited article there. Evidence is weak. Oh, you're gonna set me off with this one. Do you think being an essentialist has more to do with nature or nurture? I think the people who are arguing with me from chat have a brain defect, and that it has nothing to do with nurture. How would you even study sexuality without culture getting in the way? I mean, you have to account for that, but it takes like an enormous amount of research. He deadass needs a structured debate to organize his thoughts for this specific topic. What are you talking about? I've had the same position on this for a while. So what are we even arguing about right now? Maybe getting one of those mental health professionals who emailed you will help? No, why would I do that? Yeah, I really hate the Autism Speaks framing as all. I don't even necessarily think they're adopting that. No, but they're adopting the framework. That Columbia, no, not this. Oh, wait, this literally is Autism Speaks. Ha! This right here from Columbia Magazine talks about autism like it's a disease that you catch through nutrient deficiency. Like you give it to your kids because you have bad genes or not enough nutrients. Like the framing is bad. And I disagree with it. Psychology used to say it was caused by cold mothers. Maybe. That's nurture. They have an article on the social relationship here. Thank you. The APA states sexual orientation is not a choice that can be changed at will, and that sexual orientation is most likely a result of a complex interaction of environmental, cognitive, and biological factors. Shaped at an early age, evidence suggests biological, including genetic or inborn hormonal factors, play a significant role in a person's sexuality. Why are people getting angry at me? I'm basically just reiterating the APA position. Okay, here we go. Hypotheses for the impact of postnatal social environment on sexual orientation are weak, especially for males. There is no substantial evidence which suggests parenting or early childhood experience influence sexual orientation. Research linked to early childhood gender nonconformity, homosexuality, gay men on average, have been observed to be significantly more feminine from early childhood, while lesbians are significantly more masculine. Okay, so this is exactly the thing that I'm getting at, or the thing where I feel like you would need to investigate the topic more thoroughly. Do you guys think, and I mean this sincerely, do you guys think if you take a look at everyone who's born and raised in San Francisco, let's say in the city, okay, do you think that if you took a cohort, a slice of 22-year-olds from San Francisco and determined how many of them are LGBTQ, right? And then you go over to Saudi Arabia and okay, now here's the thing, because we want to get past the identity thing, okay? You use a device to determine a person's sexuality in both cases. You're not asking them in an interview. There's like a brain scan, okay? Somehow you can determine whether or not they're gay, lesbian, bisexual, whatever. Do you think in Saudi Arabia there would be exactly the same proportion of queer people as in San Francisco? Because to me, the answer is absolutely not. I do not think that. I can't prove that. This is a very difficult thing to study for. Closeted people exist? Wow, thank you for adding. I know you're gay because only a cunty queer would add a question mark after an obvious statement I didn't say anything to the contrary of. Like that. When the f did I say closeted people don't exist? That's why we're doing the brain scan, you stupid piece of shit. We're the same humans. Humans can be gay. Saudis and Yankees are and can be equally gay. Yeah, it's not their race that's causing it. It's their social environment. This is crazy, man. Okay, let's bring it to the most scientific definition possible, okay? Let's say that you hook the nodes up to the brain, okay? And you get guys, 22-year-old guys from Saudi Arabia and from San Francisco, okay? And you show them a big slideshow of hot Calvin Klein models, guys with their dicks and balls pressing through their soaked white briefs, okay? Right? A whole bunch of them, not just ripped. Maybe they're into fat guys. I don't care. They're bear chasers, whatever. You show them a whole lot of guys, okay? And you're doing the brain node thing, all right? Now, for a purely heterosexual guy, shouldn't be that much brain activity in the, arousal receptors or whatever. They're looking at this slideshow, okay? So we're getting like a Kinsey scale type spectrum. Where is a person peaking? Well, for the gayer people, they're peaking like they're getting a lot of arousal from most of the guys, or maybe from a lot of them. And for the straighter guys, not so much. So you're boiling this down purely to like visual attraction and arousal. Do you think a slice of the guys from 22-year-old guys from San Francisco and from Saudi Arabia would have statistically the same distributions? Like the same proportion of the population would be on a weighted average about the same? I bet you absolutely not. Definitely not. Because, and we know this for a fact, what a person finds arousing or what a person is into are heavily informed by what they consider to be acceptable, right? Acclimatization, what you're accustomed to. As is made evident by the fact that people tend to open up with their sexualities when they go to college, because college is in many cases the first time they're away from a repressive family environment, where their dad or their mom or whatever, they're sort of mandating a kind of enforced heterosexuality, but it's their exposure to these things that gives them the opportunity to realize they're into it. Whereas if they've only been told their whole lives that they're not into it, or that it's disgusting or ungodly or whatever, I think what a lot of you guys don't understand about closeted people is that a closeted gay guy isn't always in their head thinking, man, I love cocks and cum, but I can't express that publicly, but secretly I like it. In their head, they're thinking like, that's disgusting. Like the closeting isn't just like them cognitively keeping quiet about it. It's this imposition of really heavy negative feelings on it because of, well, how they've been socialized. I don't think anyone would be like that for genetic reasons. I think you have to be like socialized it. That's not precisely true. How are you arguing this point? You seriously think the exact same number of people in Saudi Arabia and San Francisco would be equally placed on the Kinsey scale? You're a joke. This is ridiculous. There's no way. I am trying to be as charitable as I can. Like, I could just ban you. I could. Because the topic does bother me. I don't like feeling like I'm being misunderstood. But I am trying as hard as I can to boil this down to you. And you cannot work with it. I think there's only so many ways that you can say the same thing. It's also true that 20 to 30% of individuals with autism spectrum disorder can be attributed to an identifiable genetic cause. In the remaining 70 to 80% of individuals with an ASD for which an underlying genetic cause cannot be identified, the cause is considered to be multifactorial. Multifactorial means a combination of multiple genetic and environmental factors that contribute together. Thank you. What is that from? Orchid Health? Forced het has been a thing since forever. That didn't stop all people from being gay. Jesus Christ. I'm not saying that there weren't gay people or there aren't gay people in areas like Saudi Arabia. I'm saying there are more gay people here proportionally. Do you really think that there's just an objective preset like hard line on how many gay and straight people there are, and they're just born that way and there's no change at all? I'm sorry, have you never experienced like thoughts yourself? Have you never gone out there and like identified in a day-to-day sense you're changing preferences and tastes in people and what you're attracted to? You really think your brain just locked the in day one and everything since then has just been you like dusting the fluff on the edge of the on the architectural find or archaeological find that is your brain? Like you're just unearthing this unchanging relic of the genetic wash? Like you just don't believe in nurture as a concept with regards to things like your personality or your interests, your taste, your sexuality, your gender, like just none of it. It's not real to you. You don't believe in that? I don't get it. I don't get it. I think this guy's calling us queer. I do that pretty often, yeah. Read my entire message? Then repost it. All you've said is read my entire message 5 times. What are you talking about? Forced has been a thing since forever. That didn't stop all people from being gay. It did stop a lot, and I see your point numbers-wise, but I can't agree with deterministic language. I think I am using anti-deterministic language, personally. There. Genuine good faith question. Does this line of reasoning not then validate the right-wing idea of queerness, be it gender or sexuality, is a social contagion? I mean, yeah, straightness and cisgenderness are social contagions that they enforce with like state mandates. And in Saudi Arabia, they'll kill you if you're gay. It's called comp het, not comp homo. We'll deal with that problem when we get there. No one's getting comp homoed, except maybe online. This is the longest stream. I can't wait for him to find out how scientifically wrong he is, lol. Okay. I know that people like to speak confidently about stuff they don't understand. Everyone wants to. I've done it. You're wrong on this. I can lead you to water, I can't make you drink. What I don't understand is what the emotional drive is on your side to enforce the unscientific essentialist position. It's anti-progressive. So I understand believing things that are incorrect because it serves a political purpose. I don't think that's good. I think you should be correct when you say things, but I understand the emotional drive, at least. I don't understand this. I don't know how you benefit. You haven't shown evidence to your position. To which position? We've looked at APA definitions that agree with me. We've literally, if you just look up what causes autism, a broad tapestry of multiple factors, including environmental. So that one's done, as far as I'm concerned. As for queerness, that social factors can influence whether you're gay or trans, I just got to say, folks, I'm really sorry about this one. I'm going to go for a little bit of a particular cut. Do you seriously think that whether or not you're non-binary is set in your brain? You seriously think that throughout history, there's always been the exact same proportion of non-binary people, regardless of social influence? What about when you encounter a person who's changed their gender identification multiple times throughout their life? Oh, I thought I was a cis man, but I realize now that I'm a non-binary person. Oh, actually, what I realized what I really was a trans woman. The other thing was a temporary stage. Oh, what I actually realized I was a trans femme non-binary person. Is it every time just the true identity is always the latest one and every previous one was fake? Or is it in actuality, people change over time and we're using these descriptors as a way of trying to identify a person's vibe, but it's not like you're unearthing an objective, unchanging artifact that is the brain. Why do people believe that? Are you afraid of the intemporality of your own personality? You're going to die one day. You think your personality will survive that? You'll be dust. Okay, can you at least point to one example of someone completely overcoming clinical depression through socialization? What? Like therapy? What do you mean by completely overcome? What does that mean? You can be diagnosed with clinical depression, and then through therapy, you can not have it. That's probably like millions of people. What do you mean completely overcoming? What does that mean? Space Boxman, you've been at this for a while. Here's a study in the prevalence of same-sex attraction against 28 countries. Speaking of people who've been at this for a while, when did I say that there aren't gay people in other countries? Why do you keep strawmanning me? Jesus Christ, look at the links you provide me. I ought to ban you. Similarly, we suggest that to the extent that the prevalence of heterosexuality, bisexuality, and homosexuality is consistent across cultures, sexual orientations are likely to have biological underpinnings. At the same time, to the extent that the prevalence of self-reported heterosexuality, bisexuality, and homosexuality vary across cultures, e.g. reported ranges of male homosexuality range from about 1.5 to 5%. Such variations may be due in part to social and cultural influences. I should crush your little chat name in my... Oh, I'm ringing you like a carrot in my hands. My heart rate is actually up, okay? Never let it be said that I'm not a participant. If systematic cross-cultural variation exists in sexual orientation prevalence rates, it may be possible to identify specific cultural factors that are associated with such prevalence rates across cultures. In addition, the influence of such factors may differ for the identity, attraction, behavioral components of sexual orientation. This has led some social scientists and scholars in the humanities to argue that sexual orientation is socially influenced by societal gender roles. Why can't we all get along? I'm insistent on this because I think it's very ideologically grounded, and also I worry. I feel like a lot of people are, I feel like we're doomed to keep making the same mistakes over and over, like in the way we regard these issues, you know? It's like there are people who are saying that we need to walk back on support for trans people in sports because it's considered an unpopular issue and it's just worth seeding. It is true, it's a very unpopular issue. I think what people often forget is the ability with a strong social mandate to manufacture support for issues. And you run a risk by backtracking a little bit that, for one, it's unnecessary, and for two, you might backtrack more in the future. You're setting yourself up to cede more ground every time an issue is made unpopular. What happens if interracial marriage stops being popular? What if that stops polling well? You don't have beliefs, and then you get known as the party that doesn't have beliefs, and that's damaging in the long run too. It's kind of a slippery slope thing, but I feel like sometimes you have to plant your feet. And on the anti-essentialist thing, I guess I've just had it in my head. I don't know. I feel like people often cede ground unnecessarily. Like, it's one of the reasons why I think I've managed to hit a good balance of being, and pardon me for taking credit on this, pretty supportive of transgender people, while also being, in my opinion, pretty derisive towards them. You know, I've made fun of the community quite a few times. Certainly, it's not like an air of like a cautious respect over here. Part of that's just adjacency. It's not a hug box. But part of it's also, I think, that once you get at the underlying deconstructed logic behind the whole framework ideologically, your understanding it becomes so much more fundamental, greater even than many trans people who, unfortunately, often to their own detriment, rely on defending their existence with stuff like, you know, well, I was born this way. Not hating on them. They've got a lot to deal with right now. I'm just saying, you know. It's just an advocacy thing, but I'm talking my throat raw here, you know, and that's not what I want to get my throat raw for. So let me get to the super chats. Thank you again, Bull Cypher. No hate to anyone who I yelled at. I think I only managed to ban like 2 people this stream. Listen, that's a level of reserved behavior on my part. I just want that acknowledged. Thank you.